Yes, so people are still logging in, but I think we should start. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for logging in to this winter meeting, morning coffee of the SCURL Copyright and Legal Issues group. We have some minor technical problems. Right, so the first speaker in of our conference will be Nicolas Jondet. He is a teaching fellow in information technology law at the University of Edinburgh. And today he will talk about AI and copyright, the debate on the future of the UK's text and data mining exception. So without further ado, I will let Nicolas start his presentation.
Hi, everybody. So hopefully you can hear me all good and see the screen. Yes, okay, so it seems to be working. So yes, Eugene asked me to do a talk about the text and data mining exception in copyright back in the summer. I think we had a discussion, and I thought, okay, that's an easy one. I looked at the consultation under the previous government, and it's all going to be all good. And then since then, we had a change of government. We had a new consultation that has been published in December. So there's I had a lot to add to my talk in the last few weeks. And so the talk is really about presenting the overall debate about copyright and AI, and also more specifically about whether, yes, the law, copyright law in the UK and elsewhere should be changed to accommodate AI, or on the contrary, to protect rights holder. Let me see. So, this issue of AI and copyright is very topical and consists of two main issues. So we have the output issue. You hear a lot of stories, you see a lot of news items about the question of what happens when AI creates works. Are those protected by copyright? Who is the author? Who is the owner of those works? So that's one of the discussion. The other discussion is about the input. So what works are used by AI models to be trained on, and those works are protected by copyright in a lot of cases, and whether that use of existing work by AI companies to train the model is infringement. And that's this input question we're going to focus on in this talk. So in this talk, I'm going to look at various arguments. I'm going to argue that the copyright exception is the best solution to solve the input issue. I show how the UK has always been at the forefront of the copyright exception route. I'll also show how the UK has informed and shaped the debate at EU level pre-Brexit. So whilst the UK was still part of the EU, which the debate on that issue. And now, kind of a reversal of fortune, the UK post-Brexit now is looking to ally itself to the EU model. So AI and copyrights exception. What are the basics of the issues? So basically, AI model to be trained, for data to be mined, and inferences to be found. Any kind of text and data mining technique uses a lot of protected material. So movies, books, music, and to operate, those works need to be reproduced, copied by the AI companies so that they can then train their AI system on those works. And in principle, that type of copying requires authorization from copyright owners. Now, how to solve that, how to make sure that the AI companies can use the copyrights of others. There's two avenues to solve that issue, right? Two main avenues. So one is licensing, so that is to require AI companies to pay essentially to have access to this content and to copy that content. And that solution is in favor of copyright owners. And there's another option, and the two can work together. I'm going to see how. It is to have a text and data mining exception, so a copyright exception, which allows AI companies and users to do what otherwise would be forbidden. Okay, so have a change in copyright law to allow for that to happen. Then there's a question, if we want a copyright exception, what is this copyright exceptions going to be like? So the questions that all jurisdictions have is to see whether, who should benefit from an exception. Should be just for research institutions like universities, museums, or other entities, like should journalists, for instance, be allowed to mine data without having to pay copyright owners? So there's issue of who should benefit, for what type of use. Okay, should it be for research? Should it be for non-commercial research, commercial research, any kind of commercial use? Okay, on what type of content? Should it be for any content or just academic research, academic papers, for instance? So there's a lot of debate on how big the exception should be, how broad should it be, and also there's the issue, of course, of what guarantees copyright holders might have, how to protect their interests. Okay, so it's very understandable that their fears should be taken into account, and the economic value that they produce and their interests. So one of the key questions is whether copyright owners can say, no, I don't want my works, the works that I own, to be used for AI training, unless, of course, I get paid for it and I agree to it. Okay, so this is how you kind of discuss about the scope and the strength or the breadth of the exception. So all those factors have to be balanced, basically. Another key issue or aspect in this discussion is this notion of international comparison and competition. So countries, including the UK, EU, US, are trying to figure out which model and which type of exception is the best for their economy as a whole. So taking into account the interest of AI companies, taking into account interest of copyright holders, what would be the best to be a leading economy in the future? And in that discussion, the general view is that the US has the most liberal and most extended the legal system that is the most favorable to AI companies and to research and innovation in AI, thanks to the fair use. So on that, I'll just say that has been this model, the American model, has been the driver of a lot of the discussion at a UK and European level. So the idea being that the UK and Europe do not want to have a model that can compete with the US on this issue, right? Now, the issue with the US model is that decided the scope of the exceptions will be decided by the courts, and there's currently around 36 cases in the US on that topic that are linked to AI and copyright in general. You might have heard that one of the first decision in that field went actually against an AI company. So Thomson Reuters sued a startup which had copied their, I think it was the Westlaw database, and the court found that this was in violation of copyright law. One of the main issues was to say, well, that the startup was creating a competitor to Thomson Reuters, and so the court said, no, it's not what this exception is meant to be. You are really just copying and competing with the copyright holder without adding any value. Okay, so that's one of the first decisions, and so far it has been in favor of the copyright owner. Just to mention another US case, it has appeared in some of the litigation that Meta, who owns Facebook, has been copying, has gone on illegal websites to download 87 terabytes worth of books, and that's going to be litigated. And the issue will be whether Meta would be able to argue for fair use. In that case, again, I think it's going to be difficult. But those are just two instances where copyright holders might win, but in others they might not. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what will be the outcome in the US. Okay, now going back to the UK, there was no copyright exception for text and data mining in the UK. The UK, under the previous government, had a review of copyright law back in 2011. And the review said, well, we need to do something about copyright. We need to change our copyright law to allow for innovation for text and data mining research, especially in medical science. And the review said, we need to change the law in the UK. We need the law to be changed in the EU at an international level to favor text and data mining. So to weaken copyright protection to favor data mining. The UK government at the time changed the law, okay, and this is the provision we have now in the Copyright Design and Patent Act, so Section 29A, which was introduced in 2014. In my view and the view of others, in breach of EU law. Okay, so back then, the UK really went quite far in testing the limits of EU law and introducing this new provision. So Section 29A allows data mining for non-commercial research, provided the researcher has lawful access to the source, so has paid essentially to have access to the source, or the source is put in Creative Commons licenses. It prevents researcher from transferring the copied data to a third party, unless there's an agreement from the right holder. And this exception cannot be overridden by contract. Okay, but the right holder can use technological protection measures to protect the way in which copying is done and how access to the material is done. So that was quite a broad exception, notably because the notion of research in UK copyright law is really not well defined, and the difference between commercial and non-commercial is not also always that clear. So in principle, it was quite a broad definition, broad exception. So yes, so that was what happened in 2014 in the UK, and that was brand new in the EU system. So nobody else in the EU had a similar system. And again, this notion of, competition and emulation between different jurisdictions, looking at what other jurisdictions were doing. Once the UK introduced that law in 2014, other member states in the EU said, oh, well, we need to do something, otherwise our research and our innovation in AI it was not really called AI at the time, but in research, we would lag behind the UK and the US. And so a series of countries introduced their own copyright exception, arguably in breach of EU law. So that was really an interesting time in EU law, where I'll focus on France. I just mentioned France. It was interesting following the discussion in Parliament in France, where both the government and the Parliament would say it's illegal to have a text and data mining exception in at the moment, because EU law does not allow for it. And Parliament saying, yes, we know it's illegal, but the UK has done it, and we want to do it, and we need to do it. So that's eventually what happened in France. So because of those, because of that and other factors, so what happened in the UK and in member states, the EU also was discussing a text and data mining exception at the time, pushed by France, Germany, Ireland, and Estonia, and the UK to have a TDM exception, really impacted the discussion at EU level. So the situation we have now in the EU is that there's a digital single market directive for copyrights that was adopted in 2019. And in this law, we have two exceptions now. So we have Article 3 that says there's a TDM for purpose of scientific research. So research organizations like the University of Edinburgh and cultural heritage institutions like museums have a right to make copies, provided, of course, they have lawful access to the sources, but they can also, that exception cannot be overridden by contract. So the copyright owner cannot say to a research institution, we don't allow you to do text and data mining for scientific research. Okay, so that's quite a strong exception, but this exception is only for not a handful of people, but or institution, but it's for this notion of scientific research made by certain institutions. Just to note quickly that can cover the type of research can also be commercial if, for instance, a university has a joint research program with a private entity, that research would be covered by that exception. Okay. So that's for scientific research by a research institution. And then you have the other exception for everybody, Article 4, which is for everyone, but so it's very broad. Anybody can use that exception for text and data mining exception, and data mining, sorry. But this can be opted out by right holders. So right holders can say, no, we don't want you to use our resources, our copyrighted material to mine. Okay, so I won't talk about the Lyon decision. There was one decision in Germany that looked into that, but I'll mention that in the questions if you have, if you want. Okay, so UK started off with its own exception. EU has one exception or two exceptions, and then the Conservative government wants to push on with more, broadening the exception. Okay, so they have a strong strategy. They really wanted to go all in on AI, especially to push research in life sciences. All about the previous government on that side of the debate was really, let's go for it. Let's innovate, let's push for innovation, AI, and the like. And it was also part of the Brexit dividend. So the idea that now that the UK was out of the EU, the UK could change its copyright law, and it should seize that opportunity to have a more competitive copyright system that allows for more innovation. Okay, so I won't put that. They looked at the existing copyright system, and they said, well, and that you'll see the options to change the system or not are almost always the same. But in 2021, the government says, well, we can improve the licensing environment. We can try to widen the existing TDM exception. We can have a broader total TDM exception for everybody, but with an opt-out, so allowing right holders to opt out of the exceptions, or we can have a very broad exception with no opt-out, so the kind of the maximalist position from the point of view of weakening copyright. The government looked at the responses and said, we need to go for option 4. That is the broadest option possible, and basically, yes, giving all the power to AI companies, users, and much less power to copyright holders. So that was quite a radical proposal. It was very favorable to AI companies and users, as I said, and it solved the issue of identification of beneficiaries, since everybody, whether you're a research institution or not, everybody or a journalist, whoever could have benefited from this exception. There was a great backlash against this proposal, including in the UK Parliament. And that's what caused the proposal to be axed by the governments, given the huge backlash in Parliament. So the creative industries, the copyright industries said, that proposal is too negative, too against our interest. And so the UK governments at the time said, okay, we're going to drop it. What we're going to ask you guys to do, so AI companies and copyright industries, to go together and find a code and establish a code of conduct to try to figure out how to manage this issue. All right, and that consensus building effort collapsed. So AI companies and copyright holders were not able to find a compromise on how to find guidance and guidelines on how to deal with that issue. So that was under the previous government, and now we have the new government that came into power in the summer. And I was hoping that they would wait a bit to have a consultation, but there's a new consultation about copyright and AI, as some of you might be aware. So it was launched in 2024, and it finishes today. Eugene told me that he submitted his response yesterday. Okay, so that's a new attempt by the UK government, by the new UK government, to solve that issue. They highlighted 3 options, 4 options, but we 3 options. So one is to do nothing. One is to strengthen copyright, requiring licensing in all cases. So option 1 would be very pro copyright holders. Option 2 would be a broad data mining exception, pretty much in the way that the previous government had wanted. And option 3 is a data mining exception with opt-outs. Okay, so that's the favored option by the government at the moment. So we will see what the consultation is and what the response to the consultation is by the government. So I think I have maybe 5 minutes. I'll try to finish. Okay, so some quick remarks on the consultation. What is not clear to me yet is whether these new exceptions will replace or complement the existing text and data mining exception. And that's actually one of the questions of the consultation. It is, should we have the old exceptions staying there, so section 29A, and then add a new exception to it, or should the new exception replace the old one? The new exception will be modeled on Article 4 of EU law. Okay, so yes, if you like, the existing UK exception will be most like Article 3, and then the new exception will be like Article 4 of EU law, so one for everyone, but an ability to opt out. In the proposal, the UK government says there should be increased requirements of transparency from AI companies to disclose which copyrighted work they use in training the models. So that's a requirement that was introduced in the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, which was adopted this summer. Okay, so you could see the UK taking that provision and wanting to introduce it in its own UK copyright law. And something I find very interesting in this consultation is this focus on technical standards. So well and good to have this kind of subtle legal system where you have, different copyright exceptions for different types of users, and then within those exceptions, allowing right holders to opt out. But how is that done in practice is really, I would say, the main challenge of that law. And the UK government is really aware of that challenge, and is really in the consultation. There's really a lot of discussion and requirement or willingness to have feedback on that, on how to make sure that the systems that are put in place make it clear for users to that right holders don't want their content to be mined or scraped, and how that works in practice. So that's really an interesting development. Again, I won't mention it, I won't go into the detail, but this very question of the extent of the technical standards about how to specify that you don't want your content to be mined has been discussed. So last week there was a court decision in the Netherlands where one copyright holder was deemed to not have clearly stated the extent to which they wanted to opt out, and therefore the court found against them, saying, no, you haven't said the way in which you decided to opt out, the machine readable way, was not effective enough, and so therefore you cannot object to a third party using your copyrighted content. Okay, so just a few minutes left to conclude. It's interesting to see that now the UK is heading towards an EU-style system of text and data mining exceptions. The challenge of any kind of system, whether it's EU or UK, any kind of system of exception is really to identify the beneficiaries of the exception and how in practice the owner can opt out. So there needs to be international standards on how to automate these processes. Those are being discussed. There are some initiatives on that, but that needs to be explored further. And we need to see if the UK and the EU help set those standards. Okay, and the last point of my presentation will be longer term. So as I said, there's about 36 or so US lawsuits that are related to AI and copyright. And so the outcome of those lawsuits, which might take years to be settled, will shape norms worldwide. So if the UK courts, especially if it goes all the way to the US Supreme Court, says most AI use is fair use, then that will have a massive impact on copyright throughout the world. Last mention, this morning I saw that the UK artists have released a silent album in protest of AI copyright proposal in the UK. So again, we can expect a lot of lobbying on both sides of the argument during the summer when, if and when the UK government goes through with proposing a bill. Okay, so that's my talk now. If people want to, I think, Eugene, yes, we have maybe time for questions if people have questions. But yes.
Yes, Ilana Thompson has a question.
Yeah, Elena? I can't hear. Do I need to do anything in terms of, do I need to unlock? Is it for me to unlock the disable? No, I can't hear questions. I'll stop sharing, maybe. Let's see.
Ilana, you should be able to talk now.
Hello, thanks, Eugen. My question is, in terms of opting out, I am not clear how an artist, for example, is able to opt out necessarily simply because of the fact that in practice there are so many probably legal copies of their songs all over YouTube and other places. How do opt-outs work in that case in practical terms? It just seems impossible.
Yes, so in practical term for an individual artist, it will be very difficult. And I think that's one of the points raised in the BBC News article I showed about the artists doing this silent album in protest. So the individual artist is a potential problem indeed, though it has to be pointed out that most of the music is owned by big music corporation. So it is their job, and also collecting societies. So it's not, those technical means will be devised by and implemented and enforced by big copyright owners. So most of the music that is produced is not owned by the artists, but owned by big corporations. And those big corporations will have a say in how to define opt-out solution and enforce opt-out solutions. So for the individual artist, I'd say one solution might come from online platform. Let's say you're an individual artist, you upload your song on YouTube. YouTube will and already to some extent, or might allow you to say whether you enable text and data mining on your personal property, if you like. So they might be on YouTube, in the settings somewhere where you could say, yes, I agree for that to happen, and you might even get paid for it. Okay, in an ideal scenario, but yes, it is going to be a challenge, especially for individual self-produced, promoting artists. But the bulk of the artists, or the music, I should say, is owned by big corporation whose job it is to enforce copyright. We have a question from Deborah.
Yes, actually, there's a question from me, and also it's a related question in the chat. My question is really, do you think there's been too much focus on the lobbying from creative industries and the use of the exception in that context, rather than thinking about the broader impact in terms of the impact on scientific research, for example? The question that Evelyn has asked is, has there ever been a suggestion to treat different types of content differently? So cultural or entertainment content could be opt-out or licensed for AI scraping, but scientific research content could be freely used for AI scraping.
Yes, so that initially was the approach in France in 2016. So the exception in France was only for academic papers, for scientific research. And the Parliament was really careful to carve out and to make sure that it didn't apply to, the exception didn't apply to music or movies. And it was quite interesting. In the paper I wrote back in the day about that issue, it was clear looking at the discussion in Parliament that some parliamentary members of Parliament had been lobbied by creative industries and made sure that the law was changed so that music and movies would not come under the copyright exception. And so, but now I think I haven't heard about that being discussed, but I could be wrong. But I think at the moment there's no distinction, because again, that adds another level of complexity in having an exception just for certain type of copyright, because then you will have an exception for certain type of copyright for certain type of people, which can or cannot be opt-out. It might be too complex to actually legislate. So the EU didn't choose to do that. The UK didn't choose to do that. So I don't think it's going to happen. But I mean, different people have different interests. I think if it were just about scientific papers and scientific research, I think governments in the UK, in the EU, in member states would have pushed for the widest exception possible. Okay, because then on the other side, you only have academic publishers, right, as an opposing side of that argument. The fact that there is music, movies, and others ensures that there's a bit more of a balance in the outcomes. So if you see it in a sense, the academic publishers are protected by the movie and the book industry and by the music industry in that respect. Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah. And I think the other question I can see in the chat is that given the kind of backlash at the moment from creative industry copyright holders, do we think that getting some form of exception is likely to be successful this time, or does it just depend what the scope is?
I think so, in part because otherwise it would put the UK at odds with the EU. I think also there might be, or maybe it's wishful thinking on my side, from the new government, the willingness or the appetite to get closer to the EU regulatory framework. I think maybe, but also it makes sense to have something that is quite similar. So I think this time it's likely to go through. I think the fact that there is also the transparency obligation is really a good winning argument. So the government can go to the creative industries and say, well, yes, we're going to put in place something that's going to lower your rights, but at the same time, there will also be transparency obligation, which would, in principle, make it easier to identify potential fraud and potential copyright infringement, and then allow you to sue more easily, potentially. So I think in the bargaining, I think the UK proposal, so option 3, is like I would think it's likely to go through, but we'll see. We'll see. I can't be sure.
I don't know if I've picked up everything in the chat, but there's another comment here that from Neil. It says it seems likely that well-resourced large corporate rights holders will work out comprehensive opt-outs for materials, whereas smaller creative firms and individuals will struggle to do so. So large publishers and licensing agencies will have increased opportunities to be gatekeepers of content. Do we think this will be to the detriment of research and education, or do we think that the TDM exception for research will remain intact throughout the process?
So, but I think for opt-out, that's why also for the opt-out system, that's why the idea is to try to develop international standards that anybody can use. Okay, so those standards for opt-outs, how to in practice implement text, robot text, or better than that systems. Of course, those systems of opting out, those standards will be developed with big right holders in mind. But in principle, any right holder could then say, "Oh, I'm using that opt-out. This opt-out system has been approved by international organization, has been approved by. It is a standard. I'm using that standard," and then that should make it a lot easier for everybody. The issue will go back to in trying to define those international standards. There will be another massive fight on how to reach whether it can be whether it's achievable. So I suspect there might be a case where different companies will have different opt-out systems, and that's the unknown. For me, that question of the practicality, having standards for opt-out in practice has always been the main issues, and consultation says it's the main issue. Well, it says that it's one of the main issues, and if you like, it's going to be another round of lobbying, of discussion, of debate. For me, it's almost the more important one. So I'll be very interested to see what comes out of the consultation on that particular point.
I think the last question before we sort of move on, could you please comment on how 2 provisions of the EU AI Act prohibited use of the specific AI systems and mandatory training for AI systems operators would affect UK organisations placing AI products in the EU and/or directing AI product outputs at EU users? So I guess it's really how does the EU AI Act affect AI organisations in the UK?
That's okay. That's outside of copyright as such. I'd say in principle it doesn't, unless you try to. So you could do what you want in the UK, but as soon as you focus, let's say you try to target the EU market, then you potentially your solution comes under the rules of the EU Act, I think. So that they would come under the provision of the EU Act if they try to sell in the EU or target the EU market. So they will come under those restrictions.
Thank you. It's been a really interesting discussion. If there are any points that we haven't managed to pick up, we may have time at the very end, or we can
Well, no, actually,
follow
I need
with you later.
No, because I'm teaching in 20 minutes.
Yes.
So,
So-
well, I need to leave in 20 minutes to teach. So, sorry, I have to leave now, basically. So
Yeah.
I won't be able to look at the.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we kind of pass on any. If we've missed any of the questions, we'll pass them on to you, and we can maybe follow up after this event.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Nicholas.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so so let me see. Yes, I'll switch off everything. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Our next speaker is Veronica Cano, who's the Scholarly Communications Officer at the College of Arts and Humanities at the University of Edinburgh. Veronica will be speaking today about making practice-based outputs open and focusing on a case study. Veronica provides guidance, navigation and support to the College of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences research community on open and responsible research publishing practices and incorporating the principles for responsible research assessment into CAS policy and practice. Veronica also provides specialist expertise on all aspects of open access publishing to maximise compliance in line with internal and external publishing policies. So if Eugene can just hand over the controls to Veronica to share her slides if she has any, then I'll pass on to Veronica to start her presentation.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Deborah, for the introduction. And I'm gonna share my screen, and please let me know if you can see my slides. Great, thank you. Yeah, as Deborah was saying, I'm Veronica Cano. I'm the Scholarly Communications Officer at the College of Arts, Humanities and Social Science. This session is about a project that I managed last year, where we made all the portfolios that we submitted to REF 2021, all the practice-based portfolios, open access. So I'll talk about the project itself and its scope, and then I'll focus on the findings and the lessons learned and some recommendations. In REF 2021, I managed the output submission for the College of Arts, Humanities and Social Science. In Edinburgh College of Art, which is one of the schools within my college, part of the submission was textual, like traditional outputs like articles and chapters and books. But a substantial part of the submission was practice-based outputs, and these are compositions, exhibitions, artifacts, performances, designs, digital media, so like, for example, films as well. So to submit these outputs, the format chosen was a portfolio or a folio. Portfolios articulated the research with the criteria of originality, significance, and rigor, which was what REF used to evaluate publications. And the portfolios included this text that articulated research, but also included quite a lot of images of artifacts or images of spaces where those artifacts had been displayed, like exhibitions, or the process of making the artifact, also images of events, audiences interacting with it. It also contained promotional posters, like posters of events or posters of films, loads of links to external media outlets like press clippings, also underpinning published research, links to Media Hopper, which is the University of Edinburgh platform for video, for audiovisual material. Some screenshots of reviews and testimonials and quotations. So I've got an example here to show you how they look like. I chose this one because it kind of like contains all the material that I've described. So, for example, in here you've got an image of a space where artifacts were displayed, a poster of an exhibition, also artifacts. Here you have an event and audience interacting with some of the objects, some screenshots of reviews here on the right, the process of making. Here is an image. We had to blur it because it contained quite a lot of signatures, but it's a guest book from an exhibition. And also here at the bottom, you can see some links and some quotations. You can also see that all of these images have different rights owners, so they were taken by different people. So quite complex items. Edinburgh College of Art submitted 83 of these portfolios over 3 units of assessments, and these were 13, that was architecture, 32, that was art and design, and 33, that was music. The process to put these portfolios together was the researchers first collated all the content that was going to go into the portfolio, so all those images, all those links, all those screenshots. And then administrators checked all that data, made sure that all the audiovisual material had been uploaded to Media Hopper, and just checked that all panels were going to have access to all this material. Then a graphic designer was hired, and she produced the final portfolios as you've seen them. The results are quite outstanding, and it's just not me that think that. Also, ref panels were quite impressed, and they noted this on their feedback to the university. Sadly, these portfolios could not be shared, and they were in a closed SharePoint. Only colleagues from Edinburgh College of Art had access to it, and that was because it contained third-party material, and the permissions had not been obtained to make this material open. So at the College of Arts, Humanities and Social Science, we proposed to hire a post that would work on the transformation of these items onto open access documents, and would also work on creating guidance for best practice for researchers that would want to use this format as a way to disseminate their research outputs. So in June 2023, we hired 3 PhD students. They worked for 11 months with us with this project, and this was in June 2023. So note that this was 2 years after the ref submission. So ref submission was delayed, ended up happening in April 2021. So it was over 2 years after that this project started. So the process for our project was first to catalog all the portfolios. We listed all the images, listed all the rights owners for each image. We then contacted the authors, our researchers, just to get them on board with the project. And then we contacted the copyright holders of each image to ask for permissions to make this open. If the permissions were obtained, we would just store the emails. If they weren't obtained, we would take it in a case-by-case basis. So if it wasn't going to affect the layout of the page too much, we would just remove that image. But if it was going to affect the layout, we would blur the image. Also, it would be good to say that most of the people that reply to our emails actually gave us permission. Where we couldn't get permissions were mainly because we didn't obtain a response from the copyright holder, so they never replied to our emails. We did have some negative answers, of course. There was a few cases where the copyright holders asked us for, quite frankly, quite a ridiculous amount of money for one image, so we just didn't make it open. where most of the images, where we couldn't get permission for most of the images in a portfolio, we would just not make it open, and that was 27 of them. So we couldn't make open 27 portfolios out of those 83. We then prepared the PDFs, removed all the links to material that we couldn't get the permissions for. So, for example, we had to remove all the links that led to films or documentaries. We added DOIs and ISBNs, and we left them ready for publication with Edinburgh Diamond. So here is where we published the 56 portfolios that we managed to publish. All the portfolios are published with a Creative Commons license, but the images are all rights reserved. We actually got the stats of the views that we've had. So far, since the outputs, since the portfolios were published in June 2024, we've had 1,395 views and 1,265 downloads. So it's not bad. We're actually quite happy with those numbers. The main reason why we wanted to make these portfolios open was because not sharing these outputs perpetuates the disadvantages of a closed research culture and prolongs the lack of presence of practice based on open research. Also, we wanted to show the huge amount of work involved in the design and the creation of the portfolios. It was important to us that we recognize the efforts of researchers and administrators that created these portfolios. We were also hoping that we could encourage more portfolios to be created as part of the dissemination of practice-based research and not just for REF. So I'm going to kickstart the lessons learned with an overall recommendation that encompasses the whole project and is for researchers to plan for open access as they are collating the material that will end up in the portfolio. Most of the issues that we encountered were due to the fact that we did this retrospectively. So we encountered issues like some of the copyright holder contacts had been lost, or some of the researchers had left the university. There was one case where a copyright holder had very sadly passed away. In a way, one of the reflections that we kept coming back to was that if best practice had been applied and permissions had been obtained at the point of collecting the data, there wouldn't be any need for our project. And that was kind of like ideally like the best scenario. The first lesson is linked to lesson 0, and it's about understanding third-party copyright. When dealing with researchers, it became quite apparent that there was a lack of understanding on third-party copyrights, and this sometimes led to frustration because actually the process of obtaining permissions can be quite time-consuming and quite slow, but in other cases had led to misunderstanding. And some of the misconceptions that we came across were things like, well, the images were taken for me on my request, or I actually paid a photographer to take those images, therefore I can just use them as I want. There were quite a lot of images in the portfolios of books, like exhibition catalogs that included images of artwork. So researchers thought that because that was their artwork, they could use those images as they wanted. And another common misconception was the thought that just referencing or citing the copyright holder of an image meant that they could just use it. And of course, all these are misconceptions. And due to this, the recommendation is to provide more copyright training. Part of this copyright training should include highlighting the copyright clearance forms that we have at the College of Arts, Humanities and Social Science. We have 4 forms for 4 different scenarios. We have a contract for photography and video commission. This is a form that can be used when hiring a photographer or a video producer to document an event. We also have the image reproduction permission form for when you want to use an image that belongs to an external institution, like an art gallery, for example. The permission to use images in published outputs is, as it says, a form to use when you want to include an image in like an article or a chapter or a book. And at last, we created a specific form for requesting permissions to use images or material in a portfolio. There's also a 5th form here. It's just a signage for events, and this is for data protection. So these would be a sign that you would put in your events, just alerting people that there's going to be recording in place. We came across quite a lot of images of events that included photographies of children of under 12. And of course, that those had to be blurred. You need specific permission for from the parent or guardian. So we included all that information in the event form as well. The second lesson is about understanding digital preservation. Portfolios are digital objects, and they contain links to reviews and articles that had covered that output. These links were saved and collated over 2 years before our project started. So by the time we came to them, most of those links were dead, really. Also, the portfolios were stored in a SharePoint site. So the recommendation here is digital preservation and web archiving awareness. There are online services like Webpack Machine that allow you to archive web pages. So you just paste a web page and it gives you a new link that you can use in the future. But also awareness for digital preservation of research outputs. So the University of Edinburgh has a lot of services that allow for digital preservation. And so we have like Pure, which is our institutional repository. We have data repositories like DataShare and Databall. We also have Edinburgh Diamond, our Open Diamond publishing service. And all these, depending what output you need to preserve, can help you with that. But these are some of the internal ones. There are some external ones that researchers can use, and we're always happy to advise on external repositories too. The third lesson is about understanding open access. In general, there was a lack of understanding of what material could be used and how. Some of the images in the portfolios were taken by the researchers themselves. They could have easily licensed them with a Creative Commons, and that would have allowed us to make the whole portfolio Creative Commons, but that wasn't the case. Also, where the output was a composition or a film or a documentary, researchers thought that what we wanted to make open was the full final output, like that film or that documentary, and of course that was never the case. So the recommendation is to support researchers understanding open access and what we can and we will share and what we cannot and we will not share. So it's whether you're using somebody else's data or you're generating your own, it's always useful to familiarize with Creative Commons licenses, which are a standard license that specify the uses that users can do with. Open access also does not mean that all outputs have to be open. In this case, we were trying to make open the portfolios, which is just a format of displaying the research process, but not the outputs itself. So to clarify that, we created a guide that is in our SharePoint, and we kind of like detail all the different scenarios and the permissions needed for like specific types of material. And this was also part of the project. The fourth lesson relates to the template use. As I was saying earlier, initially researchers were asked to add all their data to a PowerPoint, but this sadly led to a loss of image quality and also a loss of metadata. So the graphic designer asked researchers to change that and to store the data in SharePoint. So there were some folders created, and then researchers would upload that data to the SharePoint, and that meant that the metadata for the images was retained. Metadata from images is very important. It contains location and author and other important details that are needed. And the last recommendation is quite an open-ended one, and it relates to workload or added burden. Researchers felt that they have created this artifact and it's taken them a lot of time and effort. And then they had this last step where they had to create a portfolio, which is an added task. And we can only acknowledge and sympathize that this is an added task on top of their outputs. But then on the other hand, we would really like to encourage our researchers that this is a very valuable format to share, and also for the general public to understand better the process of practice-based research. But also you as an audience, I'd like to ask you, how would you approach this challenge? So to summarize, this is a list of recommendations arising from the project. The most important one is to start planning for open access from the start of the research process. Make sure that the images are properly saved, that the permissions are also obtained, and the links are all archived. The second recommendation is for advocacy, and this relates to research and professional services colleagues, but also to funders and policymakers. Open access practices have become compulsory for certain types of outputs like articles or conference proceedings, but not for others like practice-based research. And this creates some disadvantages in the humanities disciplines. Ideally, we would like to create a supportive environment for open access projects, driving broader systemic change towards open research and scholarship. Thirdly, promote the use of open access policies and platforms like at Edinburgh, we have Edinburgh Diamond and Pure. They allow for digital preservations and for sharing with a wider audience. As I was saying, if there are other external services available. And finally, I would just like to highlight the importance for copyright and training, for copyright literacy and training. And this is the end of my presentation. So happy to take questions. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. That was really fascinating discussion. It was really interesting to see some of the challenges, particularly with tackling the kind of rights and so on to make things open access after the event instead of up front. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. There are a couple of comments just in the chat asking whether you'd be willing to share the copyright forms that you used or the open access guide for practice-based outputs.
It's in the SharePoint. I think I have a version that has blocked all the links because there is quite a lot of internal links to it. So I can have a look, and what would be the best way of sharing it? Via Eugene, maybe?
Yeah, yes. I mean, if you're to share it with Eugene, then I'm sure we can then follow up with the audience from today's event to share that information. Yeah. I don't see any other other questions at the moment. Thank you. Well, if you're staying here till the end, then there may be some things. Oh, there's a question here now. Did you also rely on copyright exceptions, for example, Section 30 for any images you could not get permissions for?
No, we didn't. We just relied on specific permissions from copyright holders. We actually didn't look that much into exception. We are not copyright experts, I should say, and through the whole project, we had the support of Eugene, who's, as you know, the copyright expert at the university, and actually without his support, this project wouldn't have been possible. So we came across a lot of issues, and it was mainly Eugene that supported us through that.
Another question here says, hi, Michael's asking, hi, Veronica, are you holding extra copyright training with researchers with a view to creating the next batch of portfolios? This is something we are looking to do at Dundee.
Not yet, but that is really the plan. It is now that researchers and unit of assessments have started thinking about the next wave. But yeah, there is plans to do that, yeah.
And Maura says, thank you for the presentation, Veronica. I had included one of the portfolios in the design section of our OER index. It's wonderful to learn more about the process, and well done. The outputs are fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's really nice to hear.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Veronica, for this presentation this morning. It's been really interesting. We'll move on just now to our final speaker, and if people do have any other questions, we can try and pick them up at the end. So our final speaker today is Tim Riley, who's the Information Advisor at University of Aberdeen. Tim is responsible for copyright support for students and staff at University of Aberdeen, as well as providing general guidance and specialist support. He recently led a project to develop and launch an institutional copyright literacy strategy and accompanying policy. This was aimed to align the university's approach to copyright with its overall strategy and promote copyright literacy across the whole institution. So I'll hand over to Tim to tell us all about developing and delivering the institutional copyright literacy strategy at University of Aberdeen.
Thank you, Deborah, for that introduction. Can I just check that everybody can hear me and that they can see my slides? If somebody could give me a thumbs up, whatever, just to confirm.
Yeah, I can see the slides.
Fantastic. I love it when the technology works. Excellent. So thank you so much for inviting me today. It's a real pleasure to talk to you all about our copyright literacy strategy and what we've been doing here at the University of Aberdeen. Apologies to those of you who've been to the CILIP Copyright Conference last year. Some of these slides might look familiar to you, but I promise there is some new content as well. And we've done some extra stuff since I spoke to the copyright community last back at that conference. So for those of you who aren't aware, the challenge at our university has been to, as it says here, to empower our community to manage and reuse copyright works in a world that's changing, that's complex, that's uncertain. As we heard earlier from Nicholas about the potential changes to UK law. The situation around copyright is always uncertain, constantly changing, and we wanted a way to kind of empower the people at our university, our students and staff, but to navigate these challenges and to be able to use copyright works effectively and to manage their own copyright as well. So we decided to go about doing this by creating a copyright literacy strategy for our institution, based primarily off the model that was first adopted at the University of Kent. And we also decided to make an accompanying copyright policy as well. We didn't actually have a copyright policy before this. We were quite strange in that regard. We were one of the few universities in the UK that didn't have a copyright policy. So we did feel that we were kind of falling behind the sector a little bit in that regard. We had apparently tried to launch a policy before. This was following a CLA audit back in 2016, I think. It's before I joined the university. That identify some issues and things that we needed to work on in terms of copyright and copyright compliance across the university. So a policy was kind of drawn up at that point, but it didn't get to the launch phase. That policy was very much focused on compliance, which is understandable off the back of the CLA audit. But we felt that there was more of an opportunity to take that and develop it into something that was more than just something that focused on compliance and getting people to do as they're told. We wanted it to be more empowering. We wanted it not just to be aimed at staff, but to aimed at the whole university community. So that we thought there were some real opportunities here. We could get that policy and kind of bring us up to speed with everybody else in the sector. But then we also thought we've got this opportunity here. We can have the copyright literacy strategy as well, and that will kind of put us out there and we'll be one of those institutions at the forefront then who are really taking this forward and starting with these new initiatives to make copyright a thing that's embedded across the whole institution, and that's something on the minds of everybody who works and studies here. We'd also recently had a new organisational strategy. That's our Aberdeen 2040 strategy for the institution. And again, we saw this as an opportunity. We could link our copyright approach to that organisational strategy. You might wonder, how does copyright even fit into an organisational strategy? And I personally, I did want that as well to begin with. But then the more we looked into it, the more connections we saw to the work we were doing as a wider organisation. Our 2040 strategy has strands around things like internationalisation, interdisciplinary working. So there's lots of things there about sharing material, working together, publishing. And of course, there's copyright links to all of that. And it's all in service of our institutional mission to be open to all. And there's quite an obvious connection there with copyright in terms of making research outputs and all that kind of stuff open to everyone, which also links again to another strategy, new policy that we have as well, which was around rights retention, which launched a little bit before the copyright literacy strategy started to go into development. So that's the kind of background. That's where we were starting from. So what did we do to get to where we wanted to be? So our process, we decided that we were going to engage with key stakeholders from our community in order to make the copyright policy and the new strategy relevant to them. I mean, what we could have done, we could have had a few people from the library kind of get together over an afternoon and draw something up and send it off for approval. But we didn't want to do that because we wanted to make sure it really spoke to the needs of our community and it really was addressing the issues that they had. And also we wanted it to be relevant to them, much more likely than that they would engage with it if they could see the links to their daily work and to the study and the things that they were doing, rather than it just being something that was imposed upon them, another policy that you have to follow that's come from on high. We very much wanted it to come from the ground up from people in our community. So to do this, we started out.
Tim, it was just a question. Your slides aren't changing. It was just to check if you have moved your slides on, because we're still on the first slide.
Are you? Okay, I am navigating forward using. Okay. So everybody can still see the first slide. Okay, you've missed out on loads of stuff then. Okay, what I'll do, I'll stop sharing. And I'll try resharing those and try again and see if that will do it. I might have to do a screen share instead of trying to use the fancy inbuilt presenter thing in PowerPoint. Let's try that again. It's probably going to show you my email or something ridiculous. Right, I think it's doing a screen share. I'm going to go back into PowerPoint and I'm going to try sharing the entire presentation again. Let's see if that works. Now, has that come up for everybody? Can you see that?
We can see the first
slide. One. Let's try moving through. Is that working now?
Yes, it is.
It is. Oh, thanks for letting me know. Okay, so I'll just whiz through these. All the pretty pictures that you've missed. Okay, so we've been through the mission, background, opportunities that we were looking to exploit, our process, and then this is what we got to. Yeah, so the project team, this is what we put together. Okay, so we assembled a project team based primarily in the library, mostly with library staff, but we wanted to make sure it was inclusive as well of other people from just outside our team and our directorate. So we included key library people, people from our open research team, our information consultants who do academic liaison, but we also wanted to include our museums and special collections. Of course, they do a lot of work with making collections available, digitization, all that kind of thing. We wanted them to be part of this conversation as well. We have a relationship management team as well, who help with getting our directorate out there across the wider institution with promotion, with linking up, forming those relationships across the university. So we had a member of that team on board as well. And to make sure it wasn't just focused on our directorate, we also had a representative from one of our school administration teams, who was fantastic at giving us that kind of more external view on what was happening elsewhere within the university and how copyright issues were affecting people directly out in the academic schools. And then for external representation, we were very fortunate to have Jane Secker and Chris Morrison involved with this project. They provided us with some external consultancy, and they also helped to facilitate some of the activities that we did later on in the project, which I'll come on to in a moment. So, yeah, so once we had that team together, our first step was a kind of data gathering, kind of intelligence gathering phase, where we looked at both things that were going on within our institution, like current activities that people were doing, priorities, strategic priorities, the kind of inquiries we were getting as well as our copyright service, bringing that all together to get kind of a picture of what was going on in our institution. And then we also wanted to look more broadly at what other institutions were doing. So we looked at other people's copyright policies. For those few that we managed to find that had a strategy as well, we looked at those too. And we brought all this information together, and as a team, we created a first draft of our strategy and our policy. But didn't stop there, because we wanted to then take this to the wider community and get their feedback and change it and make it more relevant to them. So this is where we had Jane and Chris come in, and they helped us to facilitate 3 2-hour workshops, which we had with a selection of key stakeholders from the institution. And that included staff who were involved in teaching, research staff as well, staff from our impact and knowledge exchange, who were involved with commercialization and other issues around how the university uses its research and how it commercializes that. And also staff from our professional services, so people who are involved in maybe school administration, also in our Centre for Academic Development and other areas within the university as well. Mostly this was just staff at this stage, but we did have a broad selection of people from across the institution. And during these sessions, we focused on, the first one we focused on values. So that was what was important to us as people working at this institution. And this is, again, was where we looked at our wider institutional strategy as well. I thought, what are the things that are important to us? What do we want our copyright strategy to do to enable us to do? How is it going to reflect our values as an institution and as individuals working to further agendas around teaching and research and that kind of thing? The second session, we looked at activities. So that was both what are we doing at the moment in the university, what things are we involved with that are impacted by copyright, and then moving on from that, what activities do we want to do, what things do we want to start as an institution. So that might be things like what things we want to put in place to improve support, whether that's workshops, guidance, that kind of thing, to make copyright much more of a priority across the institution. And then in the third and final workshop, we looked at evaluation. So that was thinking about, it's all going well and good having this strategy here, but how are we going to know it's being effective? How are we going to measure the impact of that it's having across the institution? So when we'd done that, we had lots of feedback on the initial documents that we'd created as a project team. So we were able to substantially redraft those, rewrite certain sections, move things around, change things about, and put that back to people for further feedback. So we were kind of iteratively going through it, and it really made it very focused on the needs and the issues that people had raised. So we made sure that all the different feedback we got was reflected in those final drafts of the documents that we put together. And then the to various different university committees for further refinement and approval. For anybody who's worked in a higher institution education, everything has to be approved, everything has to go through all the various hoops and hurdles to get through all the bureaucracy. But yeah, they went through these various committees and they were approved pretty much, I think, on the first reading for all of them, which was fantastic. And that was a real testament to the work that had gone into it before and all the feedback that had come from our various different stakeholders, that we were able to craft something that spoke so much to the mission of the university and that was immediately relevant and could be seen as being important to the work of the institution. So when that was approved, that was by no means the end. We then had to work out how we were going to launch this across the university. So there are various different steps for this. One of the things that we did, and was one of the arms of the strategy, was assembling a copyright literacy steering group. This is a group that's got an ongoing remit to kind of oversee the implementation of the strategy, see how it's working, suggest areas where things could be changed or improved, and basically to be the eyes and ears across the university, picking up on issues and feeding them back to us so we can continually change how we're providing support and what different actions we're going to take to meet copyright challenges that arise throughout the university. We also planned a series of engagement activities, and I'll go into more details of those in a moment. And we also did a bit of work updating our guidance and teaching that we had available on our website, and also the workshops and things that we run, to make sure that we had something in place that was kind of up to date and that looked good and that was engaging. So when we put the word out about the strategy launching, there'd be something there that people could go to if they had questions or wanted to find out more about copyright. Obviously, once the strategy was out there, it kind of put the idea of copyright into people's minds. So we wanted to have something high quality that they could go to when they were thinking about copyright. And then that took us on to our launch. So we have officially launched the project outcomes, the strategy and the policy document back in October last year. And this involved promoting them across the university and also to the wider copyright community. So those of you who are on mailing lists might have seen various messages from me going out to let you all know that this was going live. So yeah, this was back in October. We had quite a quick turnaround from the actual approval to things going out, but we did manage to pull together some activities, and I'll talk you through some of those right now. So this, just a quick preview of the document. You can read the whole thing on our copyright web pages. This is out there in the public domain for everybody to see. So that's the web address for that there. We had it put together really nicely by our graphic design team. It's called the university branding. So it really shows how this is an integral part of the kind of workings of our university. It's really been taken to heart as something that's important to this institution. So that was the actual document. There's a policy document as well that's not quite so flashy, but that is also on the website if you want to read that one. We also, decided to do some activities to promote this a bit more. So some of that was around communications. So this was on our social media channels, it went out in our staff and student bulletins. We had images on our digital display boards in the library foyer and elsewhere. We also had a stall that we set up in the foyer of our largest library, the Sir Duncan Rice Library, that was promoting this with goodies and activities and various things that people could do. And we also ran some workshops and events. These were not as successful as we hoped they would be. We had a sort of less interesting, slightly more boring workshop that was aimed primarily at researchers around managing copyright. That had quite a few people attend. And we also tried to run some more fun sessions with copyright games and that kind of stuff, which sadly nobody wanted to come to. So we ended up having to cancel those. So I don't know what the lesson is there. So maybe make it boring and people will come. But that's where we ended up with the workshops. We've not given up on those though, and we are going to try and run some more of those with a bit more planning and a bit more notice. Later this year, we're going to try, running some more of those. In terms of the branding, it launched obviously in end of October, so we kind of tied it into Halloween as a kind of a bit of a theme for it. So we had the kind of strapline there. Copyright doesn't need to be scary. So that's how we marketed that. This is our haunted house stall that we had in the library foyer. So there's various goodies and giveaways that we had there. What else have we got? We also had an activity, a trick or treat quiz, and I can show you some of those there. So we had, I think it was about 10 different quiz questions that students could answer. And then if they got it right, or if they got it wrong as well, because we were feeling very generous, they got to pick a goodie out of our goodie bag. So these, were all copyright related questions. Mostly we managed to actually tie them into to Halloween itself. So they were around things to do with copyright cases around horror films and like Ghostbusters music and Dracula and all sorts of different things were in there. But yeah, this worked really well actually. I've always found it hard to engage students, particularly undergraduates, around copyright. But I think having the stall there, people maybe dressed up and looking looking a bit strange, like what is this going on? They come up, see it's copyright, and then we get them to do the activity. Lots of discussion about the questions that illustrated different things around copyright. Little brain teasers that got people thinking. But yeah, this worked really well. Yeah, and we had people from the copyright team manning the stall. It was great. Yeah, really good engagement, and yeah, it was wonderful to have people from the team be able to do that and to get out there and have a proper talk, engage with students. Yeah, so that was the launch. So what are we doing now that the strategy is launched and it's out there, and what are our next steps? So we're continuing to develop our engagement and guidance, particularly as I mentioned around workshops, and we're looking to develop more of those. The ones we've been doing so far have primarily been aimed at researchers, but we're looking to do some more aimed around towards teaching staff and possibly to other groups of students as well. It tends to be mostly PGRs who come. So it's trying to get in there and trying to get those undergraduates and postgraduates interested as well. And because we definitely see copyright literacy as an employability skill as well, that's important for students as they go out into the workplace. Other things that we're trying to do, we're trying to get out into academic schools. We're tying this in as well with our reading list service that was launched a couple of years ago. So we're trying to kind of bundle things together and promote it as a service that allows staff to make readings available more easily. So comply with accessibility, that kind of thing, but also linking it in with the copyright angle as well. As something that makes working with copyright works much easier for our staff members. We've also been trying out some more novel ways to try and get engagement with people. We have an online game called Copyright Heights, particularly aimed at undergraduates, because we know it's difficult to get people to come to workshops. But if we've got material on our website that people can engage with and have a bit of fun with, hopefully that will get the message out there as well. So that's another thing we've been developing and promoting. And we're also planning to do some more engagement events, maybe reprise the pop-up stall and other things like that later in this year. We're planning as well to make our October event an annual thing, partly because it took so long to make that blessed haunted house backdrop, and we need to make sure we get our money's worth from it. But it's about making things ongoing, making sure that we don't kind of drop the ball on this, and that we're continually reminding people about the importance of copyright and the ways that we can support them as well. Our copyright literacy group is now meeting regularly as well. Oops, I can't spell literacy. That's a bit ironic. There we go. So yeah, this has got representatives from our academic and professional staff, and they are guiding the ongoing development of our copyright support. They're raising issues about copyright that need to be addressed, and they're helping to, as well to evaluate the progress that we're making with kind of furthering that copyright literacy agenda across the institution. One thing that we have found difficult is getting students involved in this. They're a really difficult demographic to get engaged with this. And we are supposed to have a student rep on this group, although we haven't got one yet, but we are still trying to get hold of one. So if anybody has any tips for getting students involved, they'd be much appreciated. In terms of measuring how we're doing, this is difficult, particularly with something that's around engagement. It can be quite difficult to see how things are going, whether we're really getting the message across and whether people are really taking copyright to heart. So it's not impossible though, and these are some of the things that we are using as indicators to get some idea of whether things are going as we want them to. So we're looking at inquiries to our copyright service. We have had a slight increase in those, particularly around the time of the copyright strategy launch. Actually, I got an influx of queries, so people obviously thought, oh, copyright, there's some assistance there, and then they were sending in queries. So it did seem to work, at least temporarily, with that. We're looking at the engagement we're getting with our events and our workshops. We can look at the visits to our guidance pages. Because we're also promoting this with our reading list service as well, we can look at the uptake that we're getting for that service too. And another way we're measuring engagement is seeing as well how other institutions are engaging with the things that we're doing. We've had some interest already in our game, and also other institutions who are doing similar things, maybe developing their own copyright literacy strategies. So I've had some chats with people from elsewhere, and that's been great to collaborate and to share expertise that way. And also possibly we might be doing some case studies and surveys. These are obviously tricky to do. There's a lot of survey fatigue within institutions with surveys like the NSS and staff surveys, and people have limited time, but we are looking into whether there are ways that we can gather data in some way, either through a survey or case studies or some other way of getting that from people in the university there. And overall, we're just hoping that this strategy and the increased profile for copyright literacy is going to help people engage with some of the new challenges that are coming up, the different ways that people are working, the challenges that happen there, different ways that people are studying. There's always changing new methods of online teaching and that kind of thing. Of course, we're not immune to financial challenges with staffing. That can make things more difficult, might push copyright down the agenda for people who are just overwhelmed with other things. So we're helping that the increased awareness will at least make people think more about the things that they need to consider when they're working with third-party material or trying to protect their own copyright. Obviously, changes in the way library resources are being sourced and acquired, particularly thinking about like the ProQuest changes there, the ongoing shift to online resources and changes in models from outright purchase to subscription. It all has impacts on licensing and copyright and reuse of material. So, and of course, AI as well. And who knows what else is coming down the pipeline. But yeah, we're hoping that our strategy is putting us in a better position to meet these new challenges. So very quick go through our key lessons and then time if anybody's got any questions. So what we learned from the projects, I've just got 3 short lessons here. The first thing that we've learned is it's really important to engage with a wide range of stakeholders. So people across the institution in all sorts of different roles. Copyright affects different people in different ways. People have different issues. And if you're wanting a strategy that's going to be appealing to everybody, you need to make sure you're getting all that information and finding out what these different views are, what people's needs are. Approach people directly. People find it much harder to say no if you approach them directly rather than just putting out a general call for volunteers. That's really helped us there. Try and make it relevant to them. It's obviously much easier for people to engage if they can see how it impacts their daily life and the things that they do at work or when they're studying. Don't make assumptions about people, either about what they do or what their knowledge of copyright is. Some people we thought would know more about copyright actually didn't have that greater knowledge, and there were other people who were kind of experts in different areas who we maybe hadn't come across before. So yeah, learn from people and don't just assume what they do and don't know. And yeah, make things accessible. And a key part of that is using plain language. There's lots of jargon around copyright that can make sense to you if you've been in the space for a while, but yeah, to other people it can just seem like gobbledygook. So try and make things accessible, make things understandable. We try to do that as well in our strategy and in our policy to make it clean and plain and clear what people need to do. My second lesson here is it does take time to get these things right, so we'll allow time for planning, engagement. We've had lots of back and forth with refining our strategy and our policy, but I think it has paid off in the end. So build that time in there. Don't try and rush it and get it all done in 5 minutes. It is going to take time to go through all the different processes and be prepared to be flexible as well if things don't quite run the way you expect them to. And then my final lesson here, learn from good practice elsewhere. So we were really fortunate to have external consultants, Jade and Chris, involved in our project, but learn from expertise within your own organisation and make connections with people outside as well. There'll be people who've done similar things. They'll have lessons that they can teach you. Look at other policies. So it's not just you on your own. There are other people who can really help you get along with the process. So thank you very much for listening. That's the end of my slide. You'll be glad to know. If you want to find out more, you can check out our copyright pages there, or you can drop me an email. But yeah, that's everything. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. That's been really interesting just to understand your journey and some of the challenges you've faced. It is always, I think, a challenge to make copyright seem relevant to staff and students at the university when they have so many other competing priorities. In terms of questions, there's a couple of comments in the chat. Donia says, this is brilliant and so well done. You mentioned a copyright team. Could I ask how many members of staff are in the team, and did you involve other members from other teams in the library?
Yes. So we had a copyright project team that was put together. So I was leading that. So I am the main copyright contact in the library. I look after copyright and licensing as the information advisor. Although there are other people in that team, we had members from our open research team, and also from our subject and inquiry team and our digital skills team. So in terms of there being an ongoing copyright team, I say team, it's kind of me, but supported by other people. So there isn't a team whose sole remit is copyright, but there are people from other teams who pick up inquiries, who help to promote copyrights to the students and staff that they interact with. So it's less formal now, particularly now that the project is over. But we do have the formal steering group as well, with the representatives from across the university. That is more formal, and that is ongoing. And so we have got a wide range of views and representation in that particular group. So yeah, that's the kind of setup at the moment. Might change in future, but that's how it is for the time being. Hopefully that answers that question.
I was just going to ask, in terms of about the copyright game, was that something that library staff developed, or did you need to gain expertise from other parts of your institution to help develop that?
Is that the Copyright Heights game, the one that's on the website?
Yes.
Yeah, not the quiz. Yes. So that was a game that I created it in PowerPoint basically over a summer. It was it's mostly for me self-taught with doing different things in PowerPoint. So we it was mostly me developing with a little bit of feedback from other people in the team about how it worked. So that's how it would relate. Yeah, it's a daft idea I had, and I tried to put it together.
But you can come up from my own perspective, I guess I can come up with lots of ideas, but I don't always have the technical expertise to be able to pull off some of the ideas.
Yes, it was partly I wanted to make a sort of a tutorial, but it was partly a limitation of the software that we had. I didn't have the means to make the kind of thing I had envisioned. So I thought, maybe I can use PowerPoint, and I built it that way. If anybody wants to know how it works, do let me know, and I can share the workings of it.
Michael saying, thanks for sharing the strategy document. That looks like a really valuable document to have, especially when we're working collectively across teams. Carl saying, thank you for the presentation and for showcasing your impressive Lego minifigure collection.
Yeah, they're not all mine. The pictures that don't have a credit next to them are pictures from my own collection, but yes. I think that was there a question about the quiz?
Let's have a look.
No, but yeah, if anybody wants to see the quiz questions, I can share those with you. Just drop me a line. They're not on our website because we don't want the students to know the answers if we run it again. But but if anybody wants to see those, just let me know.
So thank you very much. It's nice to see some kind of innovative ideas for engaging with staff and students on copyright.
Thanks.
I don't think there are any more questions. If anything, if we don't pick anything up, we'll have a look and we can always fire those on to you afterwards. Sure. So thank you very much just for telling us all about your strategy and how you've implemented that. I think we're just kind of coming to closing remarks, just to say thank you to all of our speakers for such engaging and interesting topics of discussion, and to everyone who else has participated and raised some interesting questions and queries. it's been nice to have a good discussion this morning. I want to say thank you to the other members of the sort of SCURL Copyright and Legal Issues group in organising this event, particularly Gillian Daly, who did a lot of the setting up of the event on Eventbrite and managing that, and Eugene, who's been managing the meeting this morning. SCURL, our Copyright and Legal Issues group try to organise 1 or 2 events per year, usually online. Hosting them online allows us to open up beyond SCURL members and just invite the rest of the sort of copyright and community to join our events. So thanks everyone for the discussions today. The event it's been recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel. So I don't know whether Eugene or Gillian have anything else to say, but thank you very much, everyone, for taking part.
Yes, I will try to upload this on the YouTube channel, and probably it will take me a little while, but it will be available shortly. That's all for me. I will stop the recording now. Thank you.